for us than NFL draft expert, CBS Sports NFL draft expert, Ryan Wilson. Ryan, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. How's it going? It's officially mock draft season, I suppose, now that the NFL season's in the books.
And that's exactly why you're here. It's your time to shine. But you just released your latest mock draft, and share with everybody a little bit behind the curtain a little bit. Peel it back. What goes into your development for that initial mock draft, and then obviously the ones after it?
Yeah, so the mock draft is basically a 365 animal, and things don't start getting real until right about now. The All-Star games are behind us, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl were last week, and the season's over. The Combine's 2 weeks away, and then once you have an opportunity to see where teams are, talk to some sources, and get a sense for what they're thinking, this thing will start to take shape. But you guys know as well as I do, whether you're covering college, even high school to the NFL, you know who the good players are come Saturdays because you watch them every week in the fall, and you get a sense for who's having a good season and who isn't. There's a reason Carson Beck came back. But Cam Ward did nothing but help himself by transferring and playing the way he did. Shedeur Sanders proved 2 years at Colorado how tough he is and how he can go from FCS and make the jump to FBS and make it look pretty smooth. And then all the other guys, whether it's offensive line or defensive line, secondary, running backs, wide receivers, they proved themselves as well. And that's what makes this so exciting. It's so exciting, in fact, that, in case you didn't know, 73 days until the actual NFL draft on April 24th.
Well, as a general manager, even a mock draft, you're playing general manager. We know there's a new general manager right now with the Tennessee Titans. Now, if you put your hat on, there's different scenarios that you can play. You can trade down, accrue more picks, or if you want to go out and get that franchise quarterback, you can say, well, Cam Ward is the guy. But it's been rumblings that neither one of these guys are for sure franchise-level players. And if you cut the TV on last night and watched the Super Bowl, we saw Patrick Mahomes just running for his life just because of the Eagles invested in their front four. So if you're the new general manager for the Tennessee Titans, take away the quarterback scenario, what direction would you go in other than taking the quarterback?
Yeah, no, that's a great point because Patrick Mahomes is a franchise quarterback, no doubt about it. Jalen Hurts went in the second round, and there was no one really talking up Jalen Hurts. In fact, Eagles fans were going, why are we taking Jalen Hurts? We got Carson Wentz when that happened. It turns out Howie Roseman knows what he's doing. But if you're in Tennessee, first-year GM, second-year head coach, neither of whom is tied to Will Levis. He got there. He was there before they arrived. You can't win without a quarterback. Now, offensive line could be a need there, but they've drafted two guys the last 2 years in the first round, and they're good players, J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski. But at some point, you got to get a quarterback. And to your other point, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, if they were in last year's draft class, probably no better than QB4, best case scenario, especially given the way those young men played as rookies in the NFL. And I think you have to take that into the calculus as well when you're doing the who you're going to draft and where you're going to draft them. But I'm of the opinion you're not winning without a quarterback. You can have 21 Hall of Famers on your roster. You ain't winning playoff games without a quarterback. So I'm leaning very heavily towards Cam Ward here because you have to have the centerpiece to build the rest of that team around. Now, you could take a Travis Hunter and feel great about it, but that means you're still going to be at least a year away because you got to get that franchise QB.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You can't win without a franchise-level quarterback, and I use that word, franchise-level quarterback. I believe both of these guys are good win-with quarterbacks. You're not winning because of these two. And when you look at it, Abdul Carter, in my opinion, is an elite edge rusher. And whenever we sat in the draft room, we always talked about players, we always wanted to get the first round pick right. A guy that you just pencil in, leave alone, and you know for 10 years he's going to give you additive production and create opportunities for other players. So yes, the quarterbacks is the key to your franchise. If you don't have one, you don't have a chance. But if you don't have the one, you're going to be spending a lot of money on that guy, just like you see what they're happening with Kirk Cousins for his entire career. He was just good enough, but he wasn't a franchise guy.
No, I agree. That's a fantastic point. And by the way, Abdul Carter, you ain't getting fired if you draft Abdul Carter. That's like drafting Myles Garrett. You can feel pretty good about that for sure. You will get fired if you draft the wrong QB. 100%. Mason Graham's another guy that you could take and feel pretty good about out of Michigan. So that's a great thing about our position in the media. We can take Cam Ward in these mock drafts. We ain't going to get fired because of it. But you're exactly right. Abdul Carter is a great example of a young man who was only scratching the surface after moving from off-ball linebacker to edge rush and doing what he did for Penn State.
I was looking at that graphic that popped up, which had your top 10 up there, and it looked like you had Michigan's Mason Graham sliding all the way up to the number 2 spot to the Cleveland Browns. Just kind of curious. I know my dad's watching at home, and he's a huge Browns fan. What has you slotting him at number 2 right now?
Tom, I'll say a little prayer for your dad because that's a tough gig to have, to be a Browns fan for that long. This mock draft actually came out before Myles Garrett made his announcement. But even if Myles Garrett is there or isn't there, I think Abdul Carter or Mason Graham make a ton of sense. I get a lot of Christian Wilkins vibes when you watch what Mason Graham is capable of in terms of the juice he plays with at that size. He is so disruptive. He is so strong, and he's a real problem on the interior of that defensive line. I love the idea at the time of him being next to Myles Garrett because Myles Garrett said he needed to know that this team was headed in the right direction. And to Smoke's previous point, the Browns were 11 games 2023, and they did it with a patchwork quarterback situation. So you can draft the best player on your board who's not a quarterback and find solutions, at least in the short term. And Mason Graham would be a great solution to any team in the top 5 looking to bolster that interior defensive line.
Yeah, we saw Patrick Mahomes getting peeled off his back time in and time out. Just because that left tackle and that right tackle for Kansas City, real shaky. Now, so Will Campbell just shot up your board. And we know this is a pretty deep class when you're talking about offensive tackles. Now, what's the separator between Will and the next guy to him?
Yeah, interestingly enough, Calvin Banks Jr., the left tackle out of Texas, is my OT1 as we sit here and has been throughout the season. He's more athletic than Will Campbell. But if you're looking for a day one guy to come in right away and solidify the left side of the offensive line, which is what the New England Patriots desperately need with their franchise quarterback in Drake May, I feel pretty good about Will Campbell. I was talking to Walter Nolan at the Combine, and he said he's known Will Campbell going back to their high school days, and you guys probably know this. And he said there's no one tougher throughout the years to go up against than Will Campbell, and they did it in high school, and they obviously did it in the SEC. And I think that translates immediately to day one starter at left tackle for a team like New England, should they take him here at 4. They've taken offensive linemen the last few years in the draft. They just haven't taken tackles for some reason, and that's their biggest hole right now after finding that QB in Drake May. So if Will Campbell's there, even with someone like Travis Hunter, who's a sexy pick, I'm taking Will Campbell because you have to protect your quarterback. Or to your point, like Patrick Mahomes, you are not going to have a chance week in and week out.
We saw you got your top 10 set there. Obviously, plenty of moving and shaking still to come. We got pro days. We got the combine. Give me a guy outside the top 10 if you can. Who's somebody to watch that could potentially skyrocket up and be a guy we're talking about in this top 10?
Yeah, there are going to be so many guys that test well in the combine in a few weeks. And one of the guys I love watching in the fall, and we weren't talking a lot about him in the summer, we're going to be talking about him a lot as we get through this draft process. Jalen Walker out of Georgia, played off ball, played edge. You can line him up anywhere. He is so incredibly disruptive. We talk about Abdul Carter being a guy that you line up and who played off ball before moving to edge. Jalen Walker was doing it all in every game at every position that Kirby wanted him to play at, and he was dominant for most of those snaps. Such an incredibly fun player. We came into the season talking a lot about Michael Williams, the edge rusher, who battled injury but did have a good season when he was healthy. Jalen Walker was the best defender on that field, not named Malachi Starks, and especially among the front 7, he's shown week in and week out. And I love the idea of him finding his way into the top 10 and being that versatile playmaker that you can line up off the ball, that you can line up at the 9 technique, and he's going to get after it play after play.
Ryan Wilson, the NFL draft expert. I appreciate your time as always, my friend.
Thank you, guys.
For more from Ryan and the First Pick podcast, be sure to check it out wherever you listen to your podcast. You can even click on that QR code. But as always, stay locked to 24/7 Sports for all of your college sports and recruiting needs. The Ultimate College Football Show drops every Monday and Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And thank you all for joining us. For Smoke Dixon, I'm Tom Loy. See you all on Wednesday.